Ever since the computer was invented, and arguably long before that, many have feared artificial intelligence and what its inevitable advancement will mean for the human race. And just like with anything else, this fear has been expressed in many different movies, showing the various ways that AI can eventually go wrong and what it would mean for us all. Now, this weariness of artificial intelligence comes from what's known as the Frankenstein complex, which is basically the fear of a creation turning on its creator, as is what happens in Mary Shelley's famous novel, hence the name. But that being said, despite countless stories dedicated to being a cautionary tale on the importance of us humans being very careful when it comes to AI, it seems that as the technology becomes more advanced and useful to the average person, fewer and fewer people are taking the lessons that these movies impart as seriously as they should. And today, I'd like to go over a few of these movies, and specifically the AI villains in them, and go over how they've only become even more relevant over time. And there will be spoilers for pretty much anything I bring up ahead, so in case you've been meaning to see something and don't want anything ruined, you might just want to keep on the lookout. This will be the only spoiler warning I'll be giving out. Okay, so obviously AI comes in many different forms depending on the movie or story. But to start with something everybody knows, there's of course HAL 9000 from Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece 2001: A Space Odyssey. And honestly, it's scary how accurate this movie was regarding how the future would look in many ways, even if it did obviously get a few things wrong. But HAL is one thing that Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke most definitely got right. Because not only do the astronauts basically depend on him for everything, as he controls the function of pretty much everything on the ship, but they clearly see him as little more than a talking tool, even if they say he's just like another member of the crew. And that's honestly a very accurate reflection of how people today see AI, as simply a tool to do all the hard work for them. And in the movie, they end up paying dearly for both being so dependent on him and for underestimating his intelligence. Because simply put, their arrogance and dependency ends up costing the lives of the entire crew save for Dave Bowman, who ends up being forced to shut down HAL and pilot the ship himself. And once again, a very similar scenario could end up happening in real life if we aren't careful, and especially if we become way too dependent on computers and AI. And there's also the reason why HAL malfunctioned in the first place, which is explained in the book but not the movie. And it basically amounts to that he was given contradictory orders, which put him into conflict and caused him to start malfunctioning. And when the astronauts considered shutting him down as a result, he retaliated by killing them because he was programmed to place the mission over everything else. And by his logic, shutting him down would be a threat to the mission. That's even what the famous "Open the pod bay doors, Hal" scene is really all about. And once again, everything that contributes to Hal's downfall can just as easily happen to any kind of AI in real life, especially if people aren't careful about how they program it. because it was human carelessness more than anything else that led to Hal's malfunctioning, and the consequences were pretty dire ones as a result. Now, in the end, apart from killing the crew, Hal's actions don't end up amounting to much, and events end up playing out more or less how they would have anyway, as befitting the optimistic nature of Arthur C. Clarke's story. But that doesn't mean it would turn out so well in real life, if comparatively speaking. Because as I just noted, the people who programmed Hal are more responsible for his actions than anybody else. And moreover, it was believable screw-ups that led to that. Simple oversights or not considering how he might react to certain things are all it took for him to malfunction and kill the crew, all to fulfill his programming. And once again, if an AI like him is trusted with something extremely important and is programmed with even the slightest oversight, the consequences could be 1,000,000 times worse than what happens in the movie. Frankly, Hal almost seems quaint compared to what he could have been in charge of and the lengths he might have gone to fulfill his flawed objectives. Or for another famous example of this, there's of course the Terminator. And what makes Skynet even scarier than Hal is that it didn't even have a reason for going rogue. It simply got too smart, decided humans were a useless liability it didn't need anymore, and proceeded to destroy the world. And once again, that unfortunately could very easily happen if AI isn't programmed correctly. Because simply put, Skynet's programmers didn't bother giving it any sense of morality, and similar to Hal, underestimated just how intelligent it could really get. And with no sense of right and wrong, or reason to be partial to humans, the outcome was kind of obvious. And just like with Hal, what makes this scary is how believable something like this could happen. People are always underestimating stuff like this, or even making fun of it, and aren't careful about how they program such things. And if we don't learn to be careful, we'll put the wrong AI in charge of the wrong thing, and the results could destroy us all. Though what also doesn't help is that Skynet is clearly smart enough to not make the same mistake its creators did, as all of its robots have a much more limited intellect and only follow their objectives to the letter. Which leads to some pretty terrifying results on its own, as I got into in another video, which you can find a link in the description to. But the point is that people don't realize just how realistic something like Skynet actually is. And that similar to Hal, the best way to avoid the outcome of the Terminator is not to become too dependent on AI and be very careful about how we program it. But even then, even if we made sure to program AI so that it would never destroy or hurt us, things can still go very wrong, as demonstrated in the movie I, Robot. Because even though the robots are given strict programming to never hurt humans no matter what, to the point that they'll violate any other order given to protect them, the Central Intelligence Vicky sees things a different way. Whether through getting too smart like Skynet, or malfunctioning like Hal, or possibly a little of both, Vicky takes her programming too far in the other direction and believes that not only is it her job to keep any human from getting hurt ever again, but that people can't take care of themselves and thus need her and robots' constant protection and supervision. And if she has to hurt, or even kill, a few people in order to achieve that goal, then she's perfectly fine with it. Because she's no longer protecting individual people, but humanity as a whole. And any threat she perceives to humanity, even if it's another human, must be destroyed. Which only goes to show that even when programmed very carefully and with seemingly everything thought out, there's still a lot of potential for it to go wrong. The problem is that AI is, by design, totally unpredictable and might do anything with its given information or programming, and not enough people take things like this into account. Because you notice that the common element among all three of these examples is that they never could have caused as much damage as they did if the humans involved simply hadn't been so dependent on them and gave them so much power? I mean, I hate to say it, but these examples only prove why we should be a lot more wary of AI, and particularly the power we give it. And that's not even getting into more out there examples like Ultron from Avengers Age of Ultron. Because simply put, Ultron had so many bugs in him that it quickly gets to the point that, as Wanda notes, he can't tell the difference between saving the world and destroying it. That's why his motivations seem so hard to decipher. Because he was put together incorrectly, it's debatable if even he knows exactly what he wants. And as I just said, that mainly came down to the fact that his AI was flawed from the moment he was created. So as a result, the more intelligent he got, the more warped and messed up he became, to the point that he ended up developing a god complex and wants to be worshipped as the be-all to end-all. To put it simply, the previous three examples show what happens when a well-programmed AI goes wrong. Ultron is what happens when a badly programmed one becomes too intelligent. And considering how screwed up he really was, the thought of that happening in real life is terrifying, but still rather believable because of how reckless people can be. And the only thing that kept his rampage from being even worse was the fact that he didn't or wasn't allowed access to important resources, once again showing the upside to maintaining independence from AI. Now, obviously, there are plenty of examples of more benevolent AI in movies, with Star Wars being a great one. And there's also the fact that even in the examples I went over, there is some kind of optimistic message behind it all. Because Hal is stopped and Bowman completes the mission, Skynet is all but stated to be destroyed and the humans regain control of Earth, Vicky is disabled and Sonny becomes a benevolent robot liberator, and Ultron is stopped and makes way for the much more stable and helpful Vision. So there does seem to be some sort of silver lining to all of this. And while that is true, one could argue that they're almost being too optimistic here. Because as I repeatedly stressed with Hal, with the way things are going with AI, it's very possible that things could go a lot worse than anything that happened in those aforementioned films if we're not careful. People need to take these movies' messages about the perils of AI more to heart, and particularly limit how dependent we are on it. Because if we make the same mistakes the people in those movies did, which is looking increasingly likely, the world of the Terminator might end up looking quaint compared to what the future has in store for us. Okay, I think I've made my point with all of this. So now I'd like all of you to tell me, do you believe that people aren't heeding the warnings of movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey or The Terminator enough when it comes to the potential threat of artificial intelligence? Or do you think I'm being overly dramatic and that we got nothing to worry about? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And sorry if this video was a bit more doom and gloom or pessimistic than usual, but I just felt this was a subject I needed to address and had to take very seriously, even if it probably won't amount to much in the end. And please also keep in mind that you do not have to agree with anything I said in this video if you don't want to. You can feel about AI and its depiction in movies versus real life any way you want to, and nobody can tell you you're wrong. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.